Why should we study government? As our country grows, so too does our government. We as citizens have a duty and responsibility to be assured we are properly represented. What is politics? It is that process of deciding who benefits in society and who doesn't benefit in society. But how do they benefit or not benefit? World events and such things as technology contribute to how people communicate and how the government provides information. Thus is the evolution of our representation. We are Americans, and we face new opportunities and challenges. The text discusses technology and participation. It states that in the 1970s, 47% of 18 to 20-year-olds voted in the 1976 presidential election. In the 1970s, people got their news from a nightly newscast. Today, people get their news from a lot of different sources, including social media, internet news services, and 24-hour news network. Now, news is constant, whereas before it was the 6 o'clock news one time per day. Many people participated in civic life in the 1970s, primarily through demonstrations, protests, and voting. However, now, internet activism is mainstream. Online protests and petitions are commonplace, and social media plays a large part in that. Let's talk for a minute about political context. What is the size and role of government in the United States? Government is a balancing act between those wanting the government to act on their behalf as citizens and those who want to minimize government's place in their lives, so it's either too much or not enough. Increased cynicism, lower voter trust, lack of efficacy, all contribute to lower voter turnout. Consequently, we see distrust in the government, lack of efficacy, which is the belief that a person can affect change and that the government actually listens to them, all could lead to an attitude of apathy. Let's examine this graph illustrating voter turnout by age group and over time from 2004 to 2016. As you can see, the most participatory voters are over 60, and the least participatory are between 18 and 29. The younger generation brings with it to the ballot box certain ideas. These may not always be their own. As a young person, many ideas are framed by their parents, perhaps by their community, their teachers, their schools, their churches, or any organization to which they belong. This is known as political socialization. Governments also play a role in that socialization, defined as the process by which individuals develop their political values and opinions. Government performs this function by providing funding for schools, establishing standards for curriculum, and introducing young people to the various phases of government. So, as people mature, they develop their own ideas about what they think the government is, how they think the government should act, how the government would act on their behalf or not act on their behalf, depending on their political ideology that they have developed. This slide defines two types of civic engagement on acting on your views. One is civic engagement, and this would be individual and collective actions that are designed to identify and address issues of public concern. Meanwhile, political engagement is citizen actions that are intended to solve public problems through political means. So one type is to identify and address, and the other is designed to solve the problems. Once again, we find ourselves asking, what does the government do? The government is an institution that creates and implements policies and laws that guide the conduct of a nation and its citizens. Let's look for a moment at the business of government. What does the government do? There are 6 key functions performed by the government of the United States and many other national governments. First, it protects and defends their territories or lands and citizenry. Usually this is carried out by the armed forces such as Army, Navy, Air Force, or Marines. It also preserves order and stability. This can be precipitated by providing emergency services, such as in disaster relief, or many times there are security concerns during disasters. Another way to maintain stability is by providing a legitimate political structure, and that means that the citizens have conferred upon the government certain powers, and they believe these powers exercised by the government are considered right and proper. Next, they establish and maintain a legal system. The foundation of our legal system is the Constitution. Governments create legal systems by enacting and enforcing laws that restrict or ban certain behaviors. Governments also provide the means to implement these laws by the actions of the police and other state and national law enforcement agencies. Then we have the court system, which administers justice and imposes penalties. The government also provides services. The government distributes a wide variety of services, including such things as inspecting meat, making determinations about the safety of certain vitamin supplements, pharmaceutical items to determine their efficacy and safety. Also considered the building of roads, streets, and bridges, educational support, health services, facilitation of communication, and they also monitor commerce. Many of these services are called public goods, and public goods are those goods whose benefits cannot be limited and obviously are available to everyone. The government also raises and spends money. Much to the dismay of many citizens, the government raises money through taxes, fees for service, such as tariffs, but the service that the government provides do cost money, so we have the spending aspect of this function. The government spends on national defense and other services previously mentioned, such as healthcare, health and human services, welfare, educational grants, supports, and loans. The government transmits something known as cultural norms through socialization, such as educational opportunities. We will discuss political socialization in a later lecture. There are 2 categories of government. First is those who participate in the government, or you might say the who of the government. These participants might be present as a monarchy. This is when a member of royalty has absolute authority of its territory and people. We have constitutional monarchies. This is when the monarch's role is ceremonial, such as is found in Great Britain and Spain. Then there are traditional monarchies, such as that in Saudi Arabia, where the government is both ceremonial head of state and the government head of state. Next, we consider an oligarch, or a government run by an elite few. Often, these are supported by the military. Autocracy, this is a system of government in which a single person, or autocrat, possesses supreme and absolute power. An example of this would be a dictatorship. Democracy. This is when governing lies in the hands of the citizens. The United States and most other modern democracies are republics and are sometimes called representative democracies, where citizens elect leaders to represent their views. The next category of government is the how of government, or said differently, how a particular government functions or how it is structured. Totalitarianism, or when the government controls every aspect of a citizen's life. These are tyrannical governments, and citizens do not have rights or freedoms, and the state is the tool of the dictator. Totalitarianism tends to center on a particular ideology, religion, or personality. Authoritarianism. This is a government holding strong powers, but are kept in check based on other forces. Examples are China and Cuba. Individuals may enjoy some rights, but these rights are not protected by the government. Their leaders are restrained in their exercise of power by political parties, constitutions, and the military. Individuals living under the authoritarian regime may enjoy some rights, but often these rights are not protected by the government. Constitutionalism. Government is structured by law, and power of the government is limited. The government is restricted in what it can do, and the rights of the people are protected. Constitutional governments can be democracies or monarchies. In the United States, the federal Constitution created the government structure, and this system of government reflects both the historical experiences and the norms and values of the founders. What are the roots of democracy? We can trace that back to ancient times. American democracy has its philosophical roots in Greece. Decisions were made on public issues using majority rule. Note, women and slaves were not considered citizens. We know there was a time in the when the world was ruled by royalty. This was referred to as the divine right of kings. They were thought to rule as if they were God, so if you challenged a king or queen, you were challenging God. In the 1500s or the 16th century, there was a movement referred to as the Reformation. This was a time of religious and political challenge to the Roman Catholic Church, as well as the Pope's authority. Some reform-minded citizens continued to challenge the Church, thus the word protest extended to Protestants. Protestants or protesters were known as Puritans. These Puritans, in their extremism, decided if they could challenge the church, they could challenge royalty, and they could speak directly to God. Perhaps they could govern themselves. This is known as social contract theory. As the colonists moved to the New World, they began to separate from British rule. They did reject the divine rights of kings because they did not believe that a human could be a substitute for God. First, they formed ideas around direct democracy, or where citizens discussed things and made decisions based on majority rule, similar to that of the Greeks. Next came the indirect democracy, and according to its principles, people would represent others and make decisions on their behalf. Let's move on to political culture and American values. What is political culture? It is the people's collective beliefs and attitudes about government and the political process. Liberty can be defined as freedom from governmental interference in citizens' lives and freedom to pursue happiness. Equality. Notions of equality have evolved over time. The founders' ideas evolved from the Greek emphasis on equality of opportunity. We continue to struggle for legal equity every day, even today. Many arguments focus on issues of economic equality. So, to continue with the ideas of political and American values, let's talk about our economic system. We live in a capitalist society, which is an economic system where wealth is produced by privately owned entities, which are operated to produce pure profits. The key component of capitalism is property. Our government derives its power from the consent of the people, and majority rule is implied. The emphasis is on the individual and family and community. In other words, it's citizenry, and this plays a central role in the United States political culture. An additional aspect of political culture is one's ideology. An ideology is a system of beliefs or ideas about political values in general and the role of the government in particular. So, one's ideology is when people are looking at what role they would like for the government to play in their lives and in our society. To the left is liberalism, which is an ideology that advocates change in the social, political, and economic realms to better protect the well being of individuals and produce equality in society. Conservatism on the right emphasizes preserving tradition and relying on community and family as mechanisms of continuity. Emphasis is on individual initiative, the rule of law, limited government, and the free market. So, along a line or spectrum of political beliefs, or socialism on the left, this emphasizes economic equality theoretically achieved when the government or workers own the means of production. On the other side of that line or spectrum are the libertarians who believe in a hands-off government approach to most matters. Thus, those on the left seek lots of government intervention, and those on the right seek a lesser government role in their lives. There could also be a multidimensional government which measures people's opinions on the role of government in the economy on one axis and their beliefs about personal freedom on the second axis. Here we have a table describing the spectrum of ideology. Note that it revolves around the goal of government's role in our lives. Understand that most people do not fit neatly and completely in one category or another. The face of American democracy is change as our population grows. The population grows, but it's also aging and diversifying. There are many non-family or single-headed householders, and this continues to increase. Our demography supports political flexibility. So to review, then was cynicism, distrust, and apathy, which was characterized by the relationships Americans have with their governments in past generations. Now, we deal with ongoing anger and divisive behavior as we struggle with generational politics, diversified populations, and ongoing reform. It remains to be seen if we will come together with our diversity to create a new harmony for our nation.